Hey, what's up everyone? In this video, I want to share with you how to set up 3 different types of snowboards. So depending on the type of board you have and the style of riding you want to do, you really want to set up your snowboard specific for that style. So I've got 3 different boards here. I have an all-mountain snowboard, a park snowboard, and finally a powder specific board. So let's start with the all-mountain board. So an all-mountain snowboard is really designed to be ridden in any conditions, anywhere, so you can take it into the park, into powder. For the groomers, this is like your daily driver type of board. And it's the style of board that is just very versatile. So with a versatile type of snowboard, you also want to have a versatile binding set up on top of that. I would recommend that you have your bindings in a position where you can ride in either direction. So I'm gonna set this board up so that in the front, it's got +15, and in the back, you have the angle of -9. And with that +15 and -9, you're gonna be able to ride groomers or powder, but you can also take this for freestyle as well. For an all-mountain setup too, I would set the bindings back just slightly, because if you're gonna take this board into powder, or if you're just doing general turns, just doing turns is always easier if you have a smaller tail. So having an all-mountain board set up with a slightly smaller tail will just make your full day of riding just that much easier. So on this snowboard, they do have like a reference point. So this is like where they recommend that you place the bindings. And for me, I'm actually just gonna put it slightly one back just so that the tail is a little bit smaller. So I'm gonna line this up for -9 in the back. One tip for doing up your screws, I would say do each screw up a little bit before going back and getting each one really tight. With this back binding at -9 and towards the tail, the smaller tail will make it easier for doing turns, for riding in powder. But with -9, you can still ride some switch if you want to for freestyle. So this also has the reference stance in the front, and I'm actually gonna put it at the reference stance. With +15 in the front and -9 in the back, it is a more directional stance, but it still leaves the window open if you want to ride switch and do some freestyle elements in your riding. So this is a good all-mountain stance, -9 in the back, +15 in the front. So a directional stance for mostly riding in one direction, but still leaving that window open for adding freestyle elements in. It's also a set back stance, making the tail smaller, just making those general turns easier, but it's not so severe that you can't still ride this board switch. So in my opinion, this is a really good all-mountain setup. Next, we'll set up my park snowboard, and for a park setup, you really want to have a twin stance. So a twin stance means that your bindings are centered so that you have the same amount of nose and tail. This is like the perfect stance for riding switch, for doing freestyle elements. I also like to have my bindings angled the same amount. So I like to do +15 in the front and -15 in the back. For me, I feel like this stance just allows me to ride my normal way or switch. And with that twin stance, it just makes freestyle elements in the park that much easier. So one trick when setting up your stance is you can measure the width by putting your elbow and forearm in between the bindings. That like generally gives you the width of your stance. So I'm gonna line this up for -15. This board also has the reference stance, but I'm a bit taller, so I'm gonna go 1 screw hole back. One thing to remember is that you always wanna have the thick straps on the inside. And then in the front, I'm doing +15, and with -15 in the back, +15 in the front, really good, just twin stance so that your board feels like the same no matter which direction you're riding. So for how tight you want to turn your screws is you just want to do it to your own physical strength. You don't want to really reef too hard. That could potentially damage your board. So just do it snug and put a bit of muscle into it, but not too much. And you don't want to use an electric drill either, because that can also just get them too tight. And then once in a while, just go back and check that they're all snug. But this is my twin park setup, plus 15 in the front, negative 15 in the back, completely centered on the board. And this is just the best setup for riding the park, getting tricks down, freestyle elements, and just overall just feel like you can ride your board in either direction. The final board setup is the POW specific snowboard. This one is probably the most fun and versatile that you can get with your stance on your board. But for me, I'll share with you guys the stance you want to use just to make powder riding the absolute easiest. And the challenge with powder riding is that it can be tough to keep the nose of your snowboard up out of the snow. So you end up leaning quite a bit onto your back foot. But if you set up your stance properly, it takes care of that problem and you can cruise through the snow without much issue at all. So for this stance, I'm gonna do plus 18 in the front and negative 9 in the back. And with this plus 18 and negative 9, it's a stance that is gonna keep me mainly riding in one direction. I really don't want to ride much switch with this powder board. I could, but on a deep POW day, I'm mainly just riding in one direction. My stance is also going to be set back towards the tail. With a powder specific snowboard, you don't have to go all the way to the end. If you don't have a powder specific board, put your binding as far back as it'll go. This will just make your tail as small as you can and making it much easier to sink. But on this powder specific board, it does give me the reference points. So I'm gonna stick with that for now because the tail is already small. So just again, remembering that the thick straps go on the inside. And then with the front binding, I'm gonna go with the reference points again and with plus 18. Before I get it too tight, I'm just gonna check that the width is good for my stance, and I'm actually gonna pull it in just a little bit. So it's a little bit wide at the reference, so I'm just gonna pull it in a bit. Oh, perfect. So the powder board is set up, plus 18 in the front, negative 9 in the back, set back towards the tail. This is just the best stance for cruising through powder and making it easier to keep your board floating on top of it. So quick recap, we got the Allmountain stance. So plus 15 in the front, negative 9 in the back, and a little bit set back towards the tail just to make those turns easier, but still being versatile enough for freestyle or taking it into the park. And then for the park setup with plus 15 in the front, negative 15 in the back, centered so that the board feels the same, whether you're riding it normal or switch, so the perfect freestyle setup. And then finally, the powder board with plus 18 in the front, negative 9 in the back, a more directional stance for mostly going in one direction, with the stance set back towards the tail so that it's really easy to sink the tail and keep the nose floating up out of the powder snow. So these are the three setups. If you guys have any questions, let me know down below in the comments. Or if you have a favorite setup on your snowboard, let me know down below as well. I'll put links to all this gear in the description if you want to check it out. Thank you guys for watching. Have fun with your snowboarding. We'll see you in the next video soon. One more thing, guys, down below in the comments, let me know which board setup you ride most of the time. Thanks, guys.